Definitely. So now talking about safety, and then we'll jump over to talking about some of the questions. But this is a massive fear for people, and it would be good for you to kind of describe how adverse events are reported, like the accuracy, how clinical trials bring that data together, etc. Because there is a lot of bad press about medications. And it was only recently that I realized that actually the term adverse event is any negative event that was coincidental to being given a medication. It doesn't necessarily mean a correlation. It's got a probable, possible, definite. So when an adverse event is reported, and say a drug has had 100 adverse events reported, they then get really filtered down as, is it possible? Is it unlikely? And I think a lot of people hear that term as well, and they go, oh, adverse event, not going to touch it. And I was talking to an owner today about using non-steroidals. And I said, you really do have to understand that quite a lot of the GI upsets that we see in first opinion practice are probably coincidental. You know, the dog's picked up something in the park, they've picked up a virus, and unfortunately the non-steroidals, they're in place, and it might delay recovery, or it might just be there as a coincidence. So let's just spend a little bit of time talking about safety trials. What classifies as a drug as being safe enough to come to market? Because I think a lot of people go, they're terrible. Well, they can't be, because they wouldn't get to market. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so if you were to, and bear in mind that these trials also have a placebo group. So we have a group that haven't got any drug at all. And so when we talked about efficacy, we're talking about efficacy above placebo. What we're looking at with our safety data is that the dogs in the treatment group aren't any worse off than the dogs in the placebo group. And that's really what the drug companies will use for the year after launch, if you like. When we're reporting adverse effects, they'll then go back through and say, well, did we actually see this in the placebo group? Could this be genuinely attributed to the drug rather than just a spontaneous event, if you like? Now, I guess bear in mind those dogs, if they are in a clinical trial and they're client-owned dogs, yes, they will go sniffing around the park and might eat something they shouldn't have done or pick something up from another dog. With the earliest studies in the lab dogs, they won't be scavenging or they'll be eating a very controlled diet. And I guess the other thing to bear in mind is the lab dogs probably have a very low incidence of inflammatory bowel disease, where I think when we roll a drug into a population of dogs, it's a surefire way to diagnose inflammatory bowel disease in a Labrador is give it a non-steroidal. And I think there's more inflammatory bowel disease in the general dog population than people actually realise.
Really?
Blame it on diet, but actually it's the fact dogs have inflammatory bowel disease. Yeah, it kind of just goes with the territory. So yeah, I personally think a lot of dogs do actually have quite a sensitive stomach.
Right.
Okay, that could be food related. It could be. It probably is related to some type of allergen from a diet point of view. That's just
unfortunately, then the medication gets demonized, and actually,
it's actually the individual.
Yeah, but I think it's fair to say that, you know, drugs don't come to market willy-nilly, and you know there is going to be a huge amount of work into making sure that the adverse event rate that is linked to that medication is actually pretty low. And if you ever did look at clinical papers and you look at the section that talks about adverse events, it is surprising how often the placebo or the control group, they've got vomiting and diarrhea left, right, and center. They drop out because of kidney disease, drop out because of this, and you're like, crikey, that's just normal life, isn't it? Final little bit, affordability, availability, and I think this is really quick, and I love it when Gwen does this bit in lectures. So me and Gwen do vet school training and practice trainings, and people always go, so which non-steroidal or which drug? And Gwen quite happily will say that, well, we do not have any evidence that one is better than the other currently. So what we need to do is really think about is what drug is most likely to be given